What you are about to witness is a fascinating interview with a gentleman called Christopher Spencer, or rather that is his pen name. He has to conceal his real name. In the following interview, Christopher speaks about his 50 plus years in the world of high-level finance, both as a banker and a finance and investment broker. He covers everything from international espionage to covert financial agreements, conmen, murder, war, and more, with a touch of personal flair. Everything you are about to hear is true. Some questions were pre-agreed and scripted to explain specific content in his books. Most are not. You can find details of where to buy his books in the video description below. This is part 12. With your experience of all the people that you've known in the world and all the people you know affect actual change and actually control the world, compared to those who act like it, like for example pop stars and famous people and everything, how far from reality do you think this mirage is that these nouveau riche famous people create?
I mean, the celebrity culture is really so far away from reality that it's unbelievable that the mass of the population copy these people in so many ways. I believe, as I've said, in hard work and study in order to reach the proper level in life and be able to help other people. That's the other most important thing. I will say that some of these celebrities, some of these footballers, they do wonderful work in trying to get children to be looked after, to be fed properly, and in many, many other ways. But that tends to be the minority. Most of them are pretty uncaring individuals. They've got their way to the top, and they're not interested anymore in dealing with the lower echelons from which they came. So there are two kinds of celebrities. The ones that are, the majority of them are like that. The other celebrities that actually do charity work, I would fully support, and those are the ones that I would like to fasten on, along with the people that really do change the world, which, as I say, are the scientists, the honest politicians, and the thinkers, and the academics, and the writers, and the poets, and that kind of class of creative people that are really creative, rather than just the mishmash of pop stars and film stars, etc.
So from the perspective of the working class, obviously it's hard to imagine the world of high-level international finance. So can you tell us about a deal or transaction that you worked on that would surprise the average person?
Yes, I think probably my achievement in Indonesia with the privatized toll projects, which I had in one of my stories, on the road. There, people don't understand that the development of the world is very difficult because the international banks, all of them have what they call credit limits on the amount of money that they will lend to a particular developing country. And that, of course, is most often under the guarantee of the government of that particular country. Now, when privatized projects came along, and that was the idea that instead of the government financing a particular infrastructure project, that the money would be found by the private sector, in particular by the contractor who was going to carry out the project, and then the contractor would be repaid from the proceeds and the earnings of the project that they were building. Then it became even more difficult to find the money for projects in the developing world when the governments in those countries decided they wanted to privatize the project. And I was faced with a privatized toll road in Indonesia, and the international banks telling me that there was no way they could find finance for this project. But nevertheless, I eventually did find the finance for it, based upon a jigsaw of sources. I got some money out of the British government for the British content of the project. I got the support of part of the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, who were going to underwrite a bond issue for this project. But most of all, I managed to cover the Indonesian portion of the project, things like products like cement, reinforcement steel, etc., that were going to come from Indonesia, and the labor that was going to come from Indonesia. And I created a income-based bond issue. In other words, the people would lend the money and take up the bond, but they would be rewarded over the longer term with not just a fixed rate of interest, but a rate of interest adjusted by the profits, the tolls that were coming in from the toll road. And I found that in Indonesia, there was another problem, and that was the financial institutions like pension funds and insurance companies, those institutions with long-term liabilities to pay out pensions already agreed in 20 years' time, they had nothing really to invest in. They could invest in bank deposits, which gave them a small rate of interest. They could invest in a 5-year government bonds, again, which didn't give them an attractive rate of interest. So they were desperate to invest in things which gave them a better return. And my suggestion of an income-based bond issue was very attractive. In fact, one pension fund said to me, and it was the pension fund of the civil service, said, "This is fantastic, we will buy the entire issue." So I actually solved two problems. One was to finance the project. The second one was to financially engineer the financial sector in Indonesia towards a much more developed approach and beginning to mimic the complex financial sector that we have in countries like the UK, the USA, and other developed nations. If it can be done in Indonesia, I would suggest it can be done in other developing countries as well. I've written a story that hasn't been published yet called Egyptian Roulette. And that story was very much based upon one particular deal that I was trying to do in Egypt. It was for some new bridges over the River Nile in Cairo. And there were 4 contenders to this project: a German contractor, a Dutch contractor, an American contractor, and a British contractor. And we were asked to provide the finance to enable this government project to go ahead. We put in our bids. We put in our bid in pounds sterling, which of course was the best way for us, because we wanted to be paid in pounds sterling, and therefore we asked the Egyptian government to pay us in pounds sterling. But we also provided a finance package, partly supported by the British government, to fund this project, which is what the Egyptian government had asked for. The Germans put in a finance package in Deutschmarks, the old currency of Germany. The Dutch put in a finance package in guilders, the old currency of Holland. And the Americans put in a finance package based in US dollars. We put our individual proposals in, independently, of course. And then the request came back from the Egyptian government that they would like, please, 4 alternatives to be developed. And each contractor had to bid in the currency of the competing contractor and with the finance package in the currency that they were bidding in. So we had to put up a bid in pounds sterling with a pound sterling finance package, a bid in Deutschmarks with a German Deutschmark finance package, a bid in Dutch guilders with a guilder finance package, and of course a bid in US dollars with the US dollar finance package. Now that was not easy. I think it was 1 week to put that together. It was a hard week. It was a very hard week, but I managed to do it in the end.
What role do governments and political leaders play in high-level finance? And can you give us an example of a time when you had to navigate political obstacles in order to secure a deal?
I think here I have to go back to a project in the UK that I was involved with. It was called the Dartford Crossing, and this was the first privatised project in the UK. To achieve this, the construction company involved had to provide the finance to build the new bridge over the Dartford, which was part of the M25 motorway, and also refurbish the 2 existing tunnels there. We had a continuing argument with HM Treasury. The department likes to say no, as they say in government, about the terms and the conditions that would apply to a particular bond issue, which we had to get financed to finance this particular project. This went on for at least a year, with the Treasury saying, no, we can't do that, no, you can't do it that way, no, etc., etc. Eventually, we managed to get their approval only by bringing in other departments, Department of Trade and Industry, etc., etc., to say that this was a good project, by speaking to the ministers of these particular departments, and eventually the Treasury found themselves in a minority of 1 saying no to the project and had been done in this particular way. So after a time we succeeded on that, but this is the nature of trying to work a government and the nature of politics.
Many people assume that those in finance are obviously only motivated by money. How important are factors like reputation and relationships in that world, from your point of view?
I think this is probably a modern opinion and probably based more on fact. I mean, I go back to the 1960s in banking when I joined a clearing bank, Lloyds Bank. And for that period and some years afterwards, there was a completely different way that the banks serviced the public. Banking was considered to be a profession in those days and was operated under very strict rules. And reputation was absolutely everything. The confidence of the public was absolutely everything. The local bank manager in the local branch was an important guy who was respected by the customers, and the customers used to come to ask his financial advice, just as perhaps they would an accountant in the same town or a lawyer if they wanted legal advice. And the range of services that were provided to those customers was much wider than is provided today. The purchase and sale of shares, the purchase and sale of foreign currency, doing tax returns for customers, helping customers with other financial advice, etc. That was a real service. And when I moved from that after taking a degree in economics into the City of London, I found the same attitude. Reputation is everything. We must provide a service, in this case to major companies, to help them with their mergers and acquisitions, with their corporate structure, with their corporate finance. Those guys were there to provide a service. I think that now, unfortunately, the banks have lost the sense of service to their customers. They've lost the sense of reputation. And we've seen from the 2008 financial crisis that the sector has been taken over very much so by people who are motivated solely by money and return. It's moved really from a commercial banking approach to an investment banking approach where everything goes. You bring out very odd hedge fund instruments. You create things that make immediate money, and to hell with the consequences, which is why the 2008 financial crisis actually happened.